Well, good morning, at least where it is for us, Therapy Flow. Whenever you're catching this replay, we're excited to talk about networking and does it even matter for your therapy practice? Does networking, does community impact, does community awareness, do any of those pieces in this digital marketing online world matter for your therapy practice? The easy answer is yes, but we're about to give you the long answer for the rest of it here.
Yeah, I think it's easy to overlook networking, especially for those of you who hate it, like I do. I'm not a fan of networking, right? I don't like going to like your BNI meetings and just like meeting a bunch of random people and like soliciting for clients. But I think if you kind of turn it on its head a little and think of it a little bit differently, you might actually end up really liking it. And when it comes to the depth and breadth of client generation, really only takes one or two great partners that can really fuel your whole practice. So
Yeah. This topic came up. We've talked about networking, some strategies in the past, but I was reminded of it. In the last month, I've talked to a couple hundred practices, solos, small groups, larger group practices, and two types of practices really emerged that have done networking. One, it was a core channel, community awareness, community impact, community partners, networking, core driver. And especially for some new practices that launched and filled out quickly, they really did a playbook that made it happen sooner rather than later. They made their community aware. I even talked to some online practices that were virtual only across multiple states, and community or networking with providers was also a huge referral volume source, and they just did it in online settings with other online businesses and partners and friends and partners of their practice. Pick both of those. And then I've also talked to a number of practices where networking activities or community activities they were really consistent at for years. And then it was only after they stopped doing them, and then we were doing a marketing audit. Where are your referrals coming from? How many are there? Why did we get such a steep decline? That's the reality that those community partnerships and impact and resources they were putting in, when they stopped doing that, it disappeared slowly and then kind of all at once. So it was just a reminder that networking is just one form of a marketing channel. It's not necessarily what we'd always suggest you start with or you do. However, the ripple impact of real relationships, of real community awareness, of real brand recognition, and of real people referring you and who refer and say positive things about you is hard to measure in one of the most positive ways possible.
yeah. So why does networking community make a difference here? I think if we're just kind of addressing some of these things, uh, Josh, you have a great point right out of the gate. People are relational. Some really rich guy said this, but he basically said business isn't made with customers, it's made with relationships and just who you know, right? And so who you know oftentimes can just shed a light on the direction that you're going to move. So that's the people that you hire, that's the people that you go talk to, that's your friends, that's your family, that's who you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you pay and push into it, advertising can get you relationships, creating content can get you relationships, but it all comes down to making a relationship and having a conversation in some capacity. And so networking, like you said, is just one way to kind of do this. Creating community is one way to do this. And it really just keeps you front and center or front of mind if you're doing it and you're doing it consistently and you're doing it with maybe a pattern or a cadence where people can kind of hop on board for. Be
Yeah.
the guy that has the monthly party at their office. Be the person who has the Halloween thing that everybody likes. Be the person that create community, create network, and you will get referrals.
I think there's a misnomer sometimes, especially when we talk to like one-to-one networking. You go to that Chamber of Commerce event or whatever, just like with doctors or lawyers or whatever, unless someone has an immediate need or an immediate referral right that second, just hearing that you're a therapist or you own a therapy practice doesn't always connect the dots. Relationship has to attach and be and exist in some sort of consistent manner. So especially if you're on the end of like a solo practice or smaller group practice, like saturating your community with community awareness, press, articles, community events, whatever else, you're not gonna, it's gonna be a lot of time for what you can get out of it. You're gonna be better off trying to find select relationships to nurture for the people that you do meet that might have the chance to consistently refer you people. I think sometimes I hear people show up to that e-commerce event, not that Chamber of Commerce event or the BNI event. And they're like, well, I've been doing this for a year and I haven't gotten any referrals. Like meeting people alone doesn't necessarily drive business. Forming relationships with people consistently who have people to refer you, that's going to drive business. And that's, true across any size practice. But what about online practices?
I mean, it's exactly the same. I hate to break it to you, online practices. It doesn't exclude you, virtual or not. It's helpful to have relationships. If you can serve a client base, in the state, it's helpful to have some type of connection. And maybe for online practices, it's even easier for the leadership or maybe a specific team member to go out and actually reach into people in their network or their areas, because they don't have to go to an office and then go to the networking event, right? You get to just go straight to where you need to go, or go to, from your house to that business down the street, or go to, the exact place that you want to prospect, or even blast out a bunch of emails and just reach people across the state. So you don't even have to go somewhere to meet people. Online practices are not excluded from this list. It always pays dividends to have business relationships, business connections, B2B connections when it comes to building your business. Those are usually one-to-many clients instead of one-to-one client acquisition. So it always pays out. Online practices, you're not excluded.
There's nothing stopping you from doing all of the same in-person activities. And if you think about the impact point, one person going to an event or running a community table at a college or whatever it is still the same one person, whether your office was brick and mortar in that same town, whether you guys just do virtual therapy. On the flip side, and this is the case for brick and mortar practices that aren't all virtual, there's virtual community building as well. Things like doing blog features or having a podcast or nurturing or hosting, free Facebook groups for moms or online community events. There's a lot of great practices that will host monthly webinars on topic-based pieces. And these are all ways to drive like community and community awareness in large groups outside of like direct buy my therapy services now advertising and a chance to build relationships and a list and a process. We're an all virtual business. I go to a couple in-person conferences a year. I'm in Chicago. I can't say that I've done tons of direct networking for Chicago. I get coffee with some people, whatever, but I do a ton of online resources, networking, article features, blog features, podcasts, all of those things. And that's a pretty big lift on any business when done correctly, and especially still therapy practices. So within that, I kind of spoke to it earlier, but you also just have to understand, you have to understand that it's difficult to measure. It's difficult to measure. So within that, if you are pursuing this, consistency on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis is really the thing that you want to measure, because it's not always easy to measure the outcome. I think of the first time I showed up to a conference for Therapy Flow. We got 0 clients from it. And if I was like, great, we're not gonna like conferences don't work. Cool. The next year I showed up to the same conference, and we got a ton of clients from it because of the relationships we built, changing some things that we learned the first time around and some other items. And I kind of knew that was going to happen. I had to be patient with it. And I'm like, great, year 3, year 4 for that conference is going to go even better. So sometimes you just have to measure networking, both your consistency and its impact on just a much longer time horizon than some of your other digital marketing efforts or other pieces.
Yeah, this I think if you look at any big business like banks or like any blue chip company out there, um, I think they realize that a lot of marketing and business building is kind of this emergent quality from doing a lot of things. And so when you're small, it's really hard to do a lot of things because you don't have money, you don't have time, you don't have the people, you don't have the resources to do a lot of things. But when you are big, you do a lot of things because there's emergent properties that arise. And I think networking is exactly one of those elements where someone sees your ad, someone has a friend talk about you, and then they see you at an in-person event, and all of a sudden the hospital is like, right, I've seen you around. I'm here to hear you out. And so there's kind of this emergence that happens. I think this is part of like the it's hard to measure until it's gone because you don't see it that way because you're like, I'm spending dollars on ads. Why isn't it? Why am I not getting clients just yet? Or I've had 10 leads from my clients. Have those converted or not? But really, it's this combination of efforts. Success is the habits that it's the culmination of your successful habits. It's not just doing one thing successfully. And so this is one of those elements that you add it in, you find a way to keep it consistent in whatever capacity makes sense for you and the direction for your practice. And don't give it up, especially if your practice is working and it's moving in a solid direction. I think it's easy to be like, oh, my stuff is working and now I'm going to stop doing some of the things that maybe I don't like doing or maybe that take up time. And so this is exactly one of those elements where you drop it and you didn't realize that there were emergent properties from your success. And
Yeah.
maybe that was one of those elements.
And as a kind of a final point here, we get into what will make your community impact or networking strategy successful. I'd say that the smaller you are, the more direct you have to be and more precise you have to be with your strategy because you don't have the time or the resources to do high volumes of activity or things that maybe are more expensive or pay to play. You're not going to spend $2,000 to sponsor a table at a college once a quarter. That's probably not going to have the same ROI as it is for the group practice of some degree or size because you can't handle the 60 students that might come from that. Your caseload just isn't there. So going one-to-one, answering the question, this is for everyone, who has my people? Who has my people? Is it dentists? Is it lawyers? Is it schools? Is it a corporate company? Is it fill in the blank? And how do you put in a strategy to meet, to network, to showcase? All of those things. The larger you get, so when you get from solo to small group, the more consistent that you probably need to be with this. I recommend what I call the 3x3 method that I followed for myself. And what that looks like is 3 times a week, you do 3 activities. This should take you only about 30 minutes. You find someone, an ideal person who you want to have a relationship or network with. You put them on your list. Then we reach out to one person. We send them a message. We show up to the office. We shoot them a phone call. We write them a letter, whatever the outreach method is. And then we follow up with someone that's previously been on our list that we want to keep engaged and keep the relationship going with. We do that about 3 times a week. It's about 90 minutes. We do that week over week in perpetuity. And that's a great rhythm for consistent list building, outreach, and re-engagement. Then when you start to get into a larger practice sphere, we're probably selecting other activities outside of that as well. What are those college tables we can sponsor, those community events we can go into? How do we do press releases and get some level of community awareness there? How do we do brand partnerships with other individuals in the online space or in the in-person space? How do we get people to be featured on our podcast or in our own SEO content and get a backlink process going? Because we can reap the rewards of that benefit. We've got 10, 20 clinicians. Anything to add there, Attilio?
No, I think my final takeaway is maybe suspend disbelief on how you do this, because I know a lot of you guys don't like it, or maybe you're not comfortable doing it, or you're not consistent, or you're not in it to just build a relationship. And so my recommendation is suspend disbelief. This is a really powerful tactic. And maybe if it's not you, it's your business partner that's really good at this, or maybe if it's not your business partner, it's your admin or intake person that you have do this. Or maybe it's, instead of going to the in-person events because those make you uncomfortable, maybe it's sending out those emails. Maybe it's get creative on how you do this, because in a world where your therapists see clients direct, and it's really direct to consumer, right? It's hard to kind of break that shell and move. And once you move into the space where you're doing like EAP type programs or other things, your revenue starts feeling really consistent, and you have ways to get batches of clients. And I really recommend digging in and finding some way to make this work for you and your practice if you plan on being in business for, more than 2 years.
Yeah. At the end of the day, this is one marketing channel. I was in business for a couple of years before I approached like networking and relational impact points to a much higher degree. I'm both glad I didn't start with it as my first marketing place. It would have taken me a lot longer to get the clients that I wanted. But I also wish I probably would have started it sooner and stayed more consistent with it sooner than what I had started or had done with it. And so at the end of the day, you can choose not to do this. It just heightens the need of consistency and success in your other marketing channels. However, the reason why this topic came up is so many of the most successful practices that I admire that are filled out, that grow faster, that open up a second location and fill it out sooner. They do great things like Google Ads and SEO and all these other things we talk about, and we've helped them with, but they also are consistent and do the networking and community impact work that matters for them in their location. And that is more true and more often than not. So highly recommend it because it might work for you too. Catch you guys next time.